We're going to get a bit more analysis now with Oliver McTernan, who's the director of Forward Thinking, joining me live from London. Oliver, let's start with all of this back and forth thing. It seemed like there was a breakthrough. After that, it seemed like the breakthrough wasn't happening after all. Where do we stand now when it comes to the negotiations? What's the biggest sticking point?
I think the biggest sticking point is getting the Prime Minister Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire, even along, 42 days at a time. As long as the war goes on, he has the full support, as we've seen, of not just his cabinet, but I think the Knesset generally. Most politicians in Israel are fully supportive of the goal that he set at the beginning, and that is to see the demise of Hamas. I think it's unfortunate for the hostages and the family, but that goal seems to be the one that is taking priority at the moment.
Indeed, but he did also set another goal, at least to the Israeli people, which was to free the hostages. Are those two goals incompatible?
I think totally incompatible. In my experience of negotiations between Gaza and the Israeli government, pressure never works. Whatever pressure you put on, I think it stiffens resistance. And I think we're not going to see the hostages delivered by this. And also, it's putting the hostages' lives at great risk, because I'm sure no one knows exactly where the hostages are. And that's one of the problems. Unless you have a ceasefire, you cannot guarantee their safety. You cannot make sure that they're able to gather in one place and be delivered safely to their families. So I think it's a very high-risk strategy. But I think the Israeli spokesperson you had on gave us an indication of what's behind this move. He said, put pressure on Hamas, yes, to release the hostages, but the other goals of the war. Now, Gaza at present is practically unlivable in. If this assault goes on in Rafah, it will make Gaza totally unlivable in. There'll be no structure where you can form a temporary administration or whatever to look after the pressing needs of health and education, justice, all of those day-to-day needs. Now, that's what worries me. That is one of the unstated intentions of the war, actually to make Gaza unlivable in, and to see the forced, you might say, exile of the people of Gaza.
You've been talking to people, colleagues and others who are in Rafah at the moment. What have they been telling you so far?
Well, first and foremost, they feel the world has given up on them and they feel totally abandoned. I think that I'm talking now about Gazans themselves, Palestinians. They're also, as from this morning, totally cut off from the outside world, because the fact that Israel has taken over the Rafah crossing, it means that any passing through the crossing will now depend entirely upon the Israeli forces. And I think that's a deeply worrying development for them too, because many have family that have already left Gaza. Those fortunate enough to get exit and be able to stay in Cairo or elsewhere, the possibility now of their family members being able to rejoin them, I think, is much lessened by what's happened, the development today.
Oliver, what about the role of the United States in all of this? The talks are continuing today in Cairo. Has this, though, these very rapid developments left the White House scrambling a bit, would you say?
Well, I think from the start they've been scrambling, because they could have played, I think, a much more positive role by helping the Israeli politicians to understand that they are deeply traumatized. I was in Israel last week. I talked to politicians. They're still in a very traumatized state, understandably. Now, you cannot make big decisions that impact, have a long-term impact. And I think the consequences of what's happening now, through the lack of the United States putting the right sort of pressure, giving the right sort of advice, will go on.
Oliver, here we are 7 months after the start of this war. What's the way out at this point, do you think? Is there a way out?
Well, I think the only way out is first and foremost an immediate ceasefire. There are no winners in this war. Everyone is a loser. The people in Gaza, the hostages, the Israeli government, Hamas, everyone is a loser because we see the state of our humanity when we look at the people in Gaza and the life-changing conditions that they've had to endure. Their lives are changed forever. I think the only step forward now, an immediate ceasefire imposed by the international community, and then immediate engagement, recognition of Palestine, the end of occupation. That will see the end of resistance, give Palestinians the state they've been waiting for 75 years. And I think Israel will have the security it's been looking for the past 75 years.
Oliver, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. That's Oliver McTernan speaking to me from London.